Greetings and welcome to the Introduction to Astronomy. In this week's exploration of the solar system, we will talk about the New Horizons spacecraft and its exploration of the very outer parts of the solar system, especially Pluto and the Kuiper Belt. So let's go ahead and get started. New Horizons was launched in January of 2006 and took nearly a decade to reach Pluto. It did not arrive there until July of 2015, flew by the dwarf planet known as Pluto, taking as many images as it could, and then spent about the next year slowly sending those images back to us here on Earth. And that was a flyby mainly because it was the fastest moving craft to that time. So there was no way to have enough fuel to slow it down and stop it and bring it into an orbit around Pluto. But there was a chance to explore this very distant object that really could not be imaged well at all from Earth. It also visited another object, and that is the Kuiper Belt object known as Arrokoth, and did that in January of 2019. Now, the purpose of New Horizons was primarily to study and image Pluto and its system of moons, primarily its largest moon. After that, as it continued through the Kuiper Belt, an object was found along its flight path, so it was able to be diverted slightly to visit Arrokoth and give us a second up-close look at another object in the Kuiper Belt. So, what did we find? Well, when we looked at Pluto, we found that it was much more active than we had expected. Being out in the solar system, being a very small object, much smaller than our own moon, we expected to see a very heavily cratered object. But when we saw it, we saw things like this with very distinct structures, some cratering, but also some very flat, smooth areas, which tell us that they've been resurfaced in the past. We also see a number of unusual surface features. Here we see one of the edges of that, where some of the flows, almost glacier-like, that moved in toward this region, the high peak sticking up towards the left-hand side, were regions that were not quite flooded. They're sticking up above the ice flows, and we can kind of see the cracking in the ice off to the right and the upper portions of the image. And, of course, it also visited and studied the moon system, primarily the largest moon, Charon, and we can see that here, looking a lot like Pluto in many ways, although the overall structures are different, and we start to see a lot more cratering here. Now, both Pluto and Charon would be covered in ice, so when we're looking at their surface features, we're not looking at rock, we're actually seeing icy features, and that's because we are out in the depths of the solar system. So there was a lot of ice to build from, and a lot of the objects out there, planets and moons, have a lot of icy material, which it does include water ice. Now, the other object that was studied was Arrokoth, which was found to be double-lobed, two objects that had almost collided together and stuck. So you can see one object smaller to the left, a larger object to the right, and they stuck together at some point. Probably a very slow collision pushed them together, and they have remained like that, likely for billions of years. And it was also found to be unusually flat, which was, again, a big surprise to astronomers. Not just that it was double-lobed, but that one of the areas was flattened like a pancake instead of being more spherical or even irregularly shaped. But we don't see necessarily a lot of flattened objects like this. Now, New Horizons continues its mission. It is still traveling through the Kuiper Belt for a couple more years. There are searches for another object if there is anything else along its path that requires only a very slight diversion. It could visit another object. However, in a few more years, it will pass out of the Kuiper Belt and out into the space between what is called the Kuiper Belt and the more distant Oort cloud, making it much less likely that it would be able to visit any other objects. So let's go ahead and finish up what we've learned about New Horizons today. And New Horizons was launched to study Pluto and the Kuiper Belt. It found Pluto to be much more active than astronomers would have thought prior to this. And it also visited Arrokoth, a much smaller Kuiper Belt object, in 2019. So that concludes this week's exploration of the solar system video on the New Horizons spacecraft. We'll be back again next week for another exploration of the solar system video. So until then, have a great day, everyone, and I will see you in class.